welcome, Mr. Bill Thompson.
It's a pleasure. And it's good to see you again, and it's great to be able to sit down.
Welcome to unicorn.com, YC Reports. You are now a candidate for New York City Mayor.
Definitely.
But it's not the first time.
No, I've run for mayor before, at least once before in 2009. This will be the fourth time I've run citywide. So, twice for controller, 2 winning elections for controller, an election for mayor in 2009 where, we came very close to being able to unseat Mike Bloomberg, and now again in 2013.
At the time when Mayor Bloomberg got a good running for his money, and it's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
People were amazed that a person like you gave him such a run. But do you think this time around you will be able to get more votes out of the Orthodox community than your opponents?
I think so. I think that
Why so?
Because of a number of different things. I think if you look, some of it is who you are. And you go back and look at the relationship that I've had, not just for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, but for decades with the Jewish and Orthodox communities. Even before that, my father, who is 88 years old and still going strong and still working 5 days a week. You go back and look, he had represented as a member of the New York State Senate and the New York City Council back in the 1960s. He represented Crown Heights way back then. So there were relationships that he established, relationships and friendships that I established back in, as a child in the Orthodox community. It is the friends and, and working relationships that have been formed while I was a special assistant and chief of staff to United States Congressman, as deputy borough president in Brooklyn, and the opportunity to work with communities, and particularly and Orthodox communities across the borough of Brooklyn in the 1980s and the early 1990s. It's the relationships and working with people in different ways when I was at the Board of Education. And, not just the Brooklyn member, but then also the president of the Board of Education. And it's the support and the relationships that you established as controller of the city of New York. So, the last time around when I ran for mayor, there were a number of people who had supported Mike Bloomberg, but there were also a large number of people who supported me in the Orthodox community across the city of New York.
According to the New York Times, the few blocks that are surrounding where we're talking, they voted for you, and it's all only Hasidic people in here.
Exactly, and I think if you look at some of the support that I had from people like, Assemblyman Dov Hikind and others, it wasn't based on, we don't like Mike Bloomberg. It was based on the relationships that I had established, the friendships and the issues that we'd worked together on over the years. I think all of those things,
But considering Mr. Bloomberg, he got the majority, that's what the polls show, of the Orthodox Jewish vote. Do you think there is a feeling out there in the Jewish community, in particular the Orthodox community, of buyer's remorse?
I think that there is buyer's remorse in a number of communities across the city of New York. I think if, it's not a secret, I don't think that the mayor's third term, which he should not have had anyway, has been a good one in a lot of ways. I think if everything from, the mayor being viewed in a number of places as not engaged, not involved in this third term. I think that issues and instances like the snowstorm, where the majority of the city was paralyzed for days while the mayor acted as if things were fine. I think all of those, I think that situation, and now even the city's response after Hurricane Sandy, in neighborhoods across the city of New York, people have been angry and upset and frustrated at how they felt ignored.
Well, there are reports that he's afraid to appear with regular folk out there who are suffering from after effects of the hurricane.
Well, in a lot of the communities that have been impacted, I visited, in the first 10 days, 2 weeks after the storm, and people were angry. I mean, if you're and it was angry at the mayor, not just at the city hadn't done things, but that the mayor hadn't shown up, the mayor hadn't visited, the mayor hadn't expressed the concern and let them understand that they were part of New York City also. So if you're out in the Rockaways, they were angry. Coney Island, Staten Island, you can go down the list. Seagate, and as I said, the whole Coney Island Peninsula was hit hard. Seagate was devastated, but there are just so many neighborhoods and communities that felt as if, even if you couldn't bring all the resources of the city to help, you could have visited, you could have shown the concern, you could have been out there speaking to the people of the city of New York, and he didn't do that. So is there buyer's remorse? Oh, I think that, the people of the city of New York need to have a mayor who's out there speaking to them and talking to them and working with them, and that's what they want.
Well, on the peninsula at least, there is a concentration of two communities. It's the African American community and the Orthodox community that were hard hit. The mayor has had trouble relating recently, at least to both communities, particularly when it comes to the African American community or the minority community. There's the stop and frisk, which is something that's not felt by everybody in the city. But would you, if you become mayor, would you take a different approach when it comes to policing the city, or are you critical of the way Kelly's administering the police?
I think that the one thing that, a Bill Thompson administration as mayor is going to be focused on keeping crime down, on making sure that New York City stays the safest big city in America. I think that's important because I have seen in my lifetime there probably isn't this crime reduction over the last 15 or 20 years has had the greatest impact in changing the city that I've ever seen. And it has changed the way that New York City is viewed by the people who live here as well as people from outside and around the world and around the country. So crime and keeping crime down, keeping the city safe is probably one of the most important things that I will focus on. At the same point, I think that the way stop and frisk has been used is wrong, and I've spoken out about it. When you look at stop and frisk these days, first thing, stop and frisk is a useful policing tool that is being misused and abused by the Bloomberg administration and by Ray Kelly. When you look at, and you go back, 2002, there were probably a little less than 100,000 stop and frisks in the city of New York. And what do we use stop and frisk for? If it drives down shootings, gun violence, well, you had about...
or picking up guns?
Combination of things. You had 1,800, I think, and about 90 shootings in 2002. And you had about 100,000 stop and frisks. 2011, we fast forward, almost 700,000 stop and frisks, and you'll have about 1,850 shootings. Down about 50, but a sevenfold increase, or some would say a 700% increase in the number of stop and frisks.
So its usefulness is in doubt for you?
Its usefulness as a useful policing tool makes sense. When an officer has a legitimate suspicion and concern, it's there for use by the police officer. But the truth is, the way it's being used right now, depending upon who you speak to, whether in different places we call it a quota, some would call it performance indicators. You put that now in a system and indicate it. You want to see a certain number of stop and frisks. And what is happening is we're seeing young people stopped in the city of New York who are being stopped only because of what they look like. So young men, between the age of 14 and
lawyers and judges are stopped.
and 40 are stopped because they're black or Hispanic, and there's something wrong with that. And no, that is the one thing that, while I wouldn't get rid of stop and frisk, it would be used in the way that it's supposed to be used, not the way that they are misusing it right now.
Well, coming back to the Orthodox community, the mayor himself has both made comments, and the way he's handling the circumcision issue that is right now on the agenda, and there's sort of friction between many communities on that issue. How would you differentiate yourself the way you relate to the mayor, especially when, after his comments about the 10,000 black hats?
I have to tell you, that was such an offensive comment. I was stunned by it. I couldn't, and you know, the interview that he did, he used the phrase almost as a badge of honor. It was not, it was an insult. And to be able to characterize a community because of the religious garb that they wear, because of how they dress, based on their religion, is, I found that stunning. I was disappointed that the mayor would characterize a community by using anything, but particularly based on a religion, what they wear, and he characterized everyone a certain way. I found it offensive, and I know that many others did also.
Do you think he has a license to speak that way because he's himself Jewish and he feels like I'm talking to my own?
I don't think that anyone, you know, I think if I characterized people in the black community because I'm black in a certain way would be offensive also. So I don't think that it gives anyone license to be able to use that type of language. That's number one. Number two, I just think the lack of discussion with the community these days is a mistake. You brought up the circumcision issue. You know, how the city, you know, the city should be able to find a balance between the safety of children and people's religious beliefs. And the fact that you don't sit down, at the very least, and try and explore that you don't sit down, show a little understanding, a little concern, and try and come to a conclusion that works for everyone. That you just basically say, this is the way we're going to do it. I don't care what you think. I'm not going to talk to you about it. And then you kind of revel in an interview about not listening. That's not leadership. That's not leadership.
So in a Thompson administration, you will at least revisit the issue and re-examine it?
In a Thompson administration, I'd be happy to sit with the community. Let's have that dialogue. Let's have that discussion. And not just on this issue. And as I said, I realize this is an issue of extreme religious concern. This is part of people's religious beliefs over a period of centuries. You'd want to have that dialogue and that discussion. But it goes to other issues. It goes to so many other things that face this city and face the people of this city. I've always believed in working and sitting down. At times, we may not be able to agree, but we can always sit down and discuss things. There are friends today in different communities, in the Orthodox community, that we might not fully have agreed on some things, but we work together to find common solutions. That's what being mayor, that's what being a leader is about. And I think that is where the mayor at times fails. But this isn't about him. This is looking forward. This is about the future. A Thompson administration, we're going to sit down and work things out with people. We're going to sit down and, just like you and I are sitting down and talking, sitting down with community leaders and coming to common solutions.
You mentioned that you were the president of the Board of Education. Now, there is a certain conflict or competition, maybe the word, between the private sector school in New York City and the public schools. Those who are pro-public schools, especially the teachers' unions, are always opposed to any support, even what's constitutionally permissible. Mm-hmm. They are opposed of aiding yeshiva students and their families with their tuition problems, or even the lunch programs or transportation. How do you see the Thompson administration differentiating itself from the Bloomberg administration, which has been cutting support and has been fighting in courts with Orthodox Jewish parents being able to send them their special needs children to their familiar surroundings? How would you differentiate yourself from the mayor in those aspects?
Well, you know, what I'm not going to do, it isn't, I'm not going to say how do I differentiate myself, because I'm not running against Mike Bloomberg this time around. I think it is in how I conduct myself, how a Thompson administration would act. The easiest thing there to do is to look at how I acted when I was in a different position, when I was the president of the Board of Education. The Committee of Non-Public Schools, of which the yeshivas are part of, believed that they were entitled to certain services from the public school, computer programs, a number of different things that, as you pointed out, people would be constitutionally entitled to. But the degree that they were entitled to was kind of left to the Board of Education at that point. I took a liberal interpretation to try and drive as many resources as I could to the yeshivas and the non-public schools, the parochial schools in the city of New York. Why? I never looked at it, and still don't, as those are your children and these are our children in the public schools. They're all our children. If you're the mayor of the city of New York, the way how children do and how well they perform in yeshivas is important to the future of the city of New York. How children perform in public schools obviously is important to the future of New York City. Those are our children. Children in the Catholic parochial schools. Those are our children. They're not your children, and these are our children. Those are all our children. So in the same way that I had worked to come to, again, compromise, to come to fair resolution, to be able to make sure that resources went to the parochial schools, to the yeshivas then, I do the same thing now. It's not, as I said, the easiest way to be able to look and see how someone would act is to be able to look and see what they've done. The old phrase that, the best way to figure out what someone will do is to see what they've done. And I think when you look at my tenure at the president of the old Board of Education, I thought I took a very fair approach. And to this day, there's so many people from A Good of Israel and others who are friends because of the work that we did then.
And do you think those who are friends of A Good of Israel, I know that it's a non-profit organization, it can't take any political positions, but people like Haskell Bennett or his friends, do you think they're going to be on your team and support you?
I think so. I mean, I think that people like Haskell are friends, and and I'm not just going to say friends; they're advisors, people that I rely on to be able to, to be able to say, I think you should take a look at this situation, or be able to look at it in slightly different ways. I think that people like Haskell and so many others, Rabbi Froelich, if you go across the, across the spectrum, there are a number of people I've had the chance to work with over a period of years who I would hope would continue to be both advisors as well as supporters. So it is, I think I have a number of friends out there.
Now, we know you're not running against, as you mentioned, you're not running again against the mayor, but there are reports out that those who support the mayor, his whole infrastructure, they're trying to coalesce against your opponent, to Christine Quinn. But then there are other reports that the mayor is not happy that he's trying to schlep Mrs. Clinton into the fray. Do you think the mayor will have influence in appointing and who's his successor is?
I don't think that the people in the city of New York believe in letting anybody designate a successor for any position, any elected position. I think this is about each candidate reaching out to the people of the city of New York, talking about a vision for the future of New York. What does it mean in housing and education? What does it mean for job creation? What about understanding the people of the city of New York, not just in Manhattan, but in all 5 boroughs and the communities of New York City? That's what makes us so great. That's the thing that makes New York City great, is the communities of this city and the boroughs. That's, as I said, that is New York City. So I don't think that anyone, whether it's the mayor or anybody else, is going to be able to designate a successor or designate a person to be the next mayor of the city of New York. People of the city are going to make that decision. And they're going to want to hear a vision and a direction. And I believe that I'll be able to provide the strongest vision for one New York. One New York, all 5 boroughs, but all of us together.
Yeah, many of the potential candidates who are running for mayor opponents in the primary are mostly based in Manhattan. Do you think you have a better chance of getting elected because your background is in Brooklyn? Maybe you're living now in Manhattan, but do you think you have your Brooklyn base secured?
I think that, while I live in Manhattan, as you point out right now, I live in Harlem, and have for the last 4 years, but for over 55 years or for over 50 years.
You're giving away your age.
I know. Okay. I've lived in Brooklyn, and I went to public school in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn. My daughter lives in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is in my blood. I think that the one thing about it, it's not just Brooklyn. It is an understanding of, when the streets in Brooklyn don't get plowed after a snowstorm, I know what it's like.
Oh, it's a nice day to eat a sandwich and go to the park. Huh?
Yeah, it depends upon where you're at. You have to be able to go to a Broadway show and to be able to say there were lots of people in the street. It is understanding what it means. It is realizing that, that Brooklyn is so much like Queens, is so much like Staten Island, is so much like the Bronx, that, at times we get angry. We get angry because we don't have that focus. So it is understanding and having, a Brooklyn background, and realizing what it's like. That also lets you understand what people in other boroughs feel when they get ignored, when the focus doesn't appear to be on them, when the problems that face us in so much of the city isn't paid attention to, because there's a focus on a very narrow area in Manhattan. I think it helps in understanding how we all feel when we don't have the attention paid to us that we're entitled to.
You're running not only as a Democrat, you're also going to be running on the other parties and under some of the parties?
Well, right now it's, and haven't explored other parties at this point, I'm running in the Democratic primary. I think that, I've run in the past on the Working Families line and was proud of that. But right now, for this, for the next year's September election, more than anything, it's the Democratic primary, and I think I believe that the winner of the Democratic primary is going to be the next mayor of the city of New York.
Do you expect the Working Families Party to support you again this time around?
Too early to be able to judge. I think that more than anything right now, there are other lines and other things. I think first thing, being a Democrat and running as a Democrat on the Democratic line helps to define is about core belief, is about some of the things that I stand for. And other things we'll explore later, but right now, major focus is being on the Democratic line.
But speaking economically, where do you position yourself? Would you position yourself more for working families, small capitals, for those who are struggling, those who are going to have health insurance and are suffering from the economic effects of the Great Recession, or will you be more concerned if Wall Street is doing well?
Well,
after all, the taxes that are raised in the city are coming from Wall Street.
I think that it's a combination of, to say that, that if you stand up and fight for those in need, if you stand up and fight for working parents in the city of New York, middle-class parents, or middle-class individuals all across the city of New York, that you turn your back on another segment. I don't think you have to. I think the one thing that people want to see is a mayor who will represent the entire city, who realizes, yes, revenue from Wall Street and the business community is important to New York City's growth and its future. Just as small businesses spread out across the city of New York in the communities are important to our growth to our growth also. You can do both. I think it is in looking at the after effects of the storm, looking at communities like Seagate and the Rockaways and others and saying, wait, we have to do something better. We have to work to rebuild and rebuild smarter and better. At the same point, you can pay attention to those in Coney Island in the housing authority developments who have been snubbed, who didn't have their, who, if they would have bailed out, if they would have pumped the water out faster, they would have been back up a lot quicker. They would have had heat and hot water faster than the poor response. So we can do, the one thing that a mayor should do is to work for all the people of the city of New York, is to understand that unemployment in black communities and Hispanic communities across the city of New York that is, that is unacceptably high. If the city is in excess of 9%, those communities are in excess, particularly with men, of 20, 25%, and not even to talk about young people that we need to find jobs for them. It is to, if you pay attention there, it doesn't mean that you can't work to develop jobs in Midtown Manhattan also. We need to have a mayor who focuses on the entire city and understands that it is important that Wall Street is just as important as they would say as Main Street is to New York City, and that each community and that the businesses in those communities are as important as the big businesses in Manhattan.
Do you think that now that we're after the election, and there is somewhat a mood in the country that tax the rich, that New York City will also get into the fray? Should there be a Thompson administration, that you will also tap into that sentiment?
I think that if you look, I supported the governor when he talked about increasing taxes and really a more progressive tax system in the state of New York. The president is looking at high earners to be able to close a budget deficit and really to be able to close, not even a budget deficit, but just huge, deficit that we have built up in so many different ways. Look, I think the tax increases, as the mayor of the city of New York, tax increases are a last resort. I don't think you lead with that. I think that at a certain point, you exhaust every avenue that you can before you talk about tax increases. So I just think that right now, talking about tax increases in any place in the city of New York right now doesn't make sense. Where will we be in a year and a half or 2 years as a city? Will the economy have turned around sufficiently enough to be able to drive additional dollars to the city's budget to be able to create a surplus for a change? We've had those situations where we had a surplus. Where are we going to be? So just to talk about in the year 2012 right now, what we're going to do in 2014 as the next mayor, I think that's a little premature.
Well, there is a feeling out in the community that up till now, at least with the Bloomberg administration, small business people complain that there's a hidden tax. There is the ticketing and the,
yes,
and fines and that are used not for enforcement as much as it's used to balance the budget.
Revenue. And
so that's kind of a hidden tax that everybody's paying when you go shop in any establishment. How would you handle it differently? Will the Thompson administration be more transparent in the way it raises its funds?
I think that's important. I think the one thing that the people of the city want is honesty. And you use the correct word in talking about honesty, it is transparency. So what you've seen is small businesses across the city of New York who have complained for years. You can go back and look at the 2009 election. I talked about affordability, and I think it's a bigger issue now than ever before. It's not just the businesses, it's the homeowners, it's those who rent, it's everyone. It's everything from the assessments that homeowners are hit with. Well, assessments are going up. Valuation of homes isn't going up dramatically. A backdoor tax. Water rates that for years have gone up in double digits. 13, 14%, when I proved when I was comptroller that they only needed to go up 5 or 6% to run that system efficiently. Where did the extra money go? Another backdoor tax goes into the city's general fund. Parking fines, which are stunning at this point. Double parking is what, over $115, $125 these days. It is all of those things. Businesses where an inspector comes in and gives them a ticket for no reason other than to try and drive additional revenue or to be able to show that they're doing their job. All of those things work to squeeze New Yorkers. Middle class, working New Yorkers, poor New Yorkers, they will tell you they feel as if they're being squeezed out of the city of New York. And all of that creates additional costs, whether it's for housing or just to be able to live in the city of New York. Those are things that press and push people out of the city of New York each and every day. So transparency and honesty, I think, is important. And if we have deficits, if we have problems, to be honest with the people of the city of New York, to be honest with the people of this city, to be honest with the municipal workforce, here's where we're at. Here's what the honest truth is. I think people, and in particularly, people want to see if, that their tax funds, that their tax money, that they're getting something for it. And I think that's important also. So all of those things under the whole banner of affordability, helped us push people out of the city of New York, and we need to change that.
So one more, last question, personal question. There was a feeling, at least maybe among the press corps, that you were maybe didn't have much fire in your belly in pursuing the mayoralty. Will we see a different Bill Thompson this time around?
I think the one thing that you'll see that'll be different this time, and I'll give you an example. I was in downtown Brooklyn at an event in the campaign in 2009. There were press people there. The mayor had been there before and had gotten a very lukewarm response. I showed up, the crowd, and this was thousands of people. It was the Atlantic Antic. I was in downtown Brooklyn. The crowd was incredibly enthusiastic. Energy level, both the crowd and my energy level, very high. I didn't get to read about that or see that anywhere. And when you look at someone and say, didn't you notice? You never read about it. I think that the one thing that you will see that will be different first, because the truth is, I ran an energetic campaign. It just wasn't an anti-Bloomberg vote. There were a lot of pro-Thompson votes out there and people who wanted a different direction for the city of New York. I think we're going to see a bit fairer coverage this time. I want to be, and I'm working hard to be the next mayor of the city of New York. I'm going to be out there. People are going to get to see me and see an energetic, aggressive campaign. At the same point, I think that the thing that will be different, because I think the press last time had looked at it as Mike Bloomberg can't lose. And because of that, those were the stories that they wrote from the beginning, at times ignoring what was in front of them.
They sure were surprised in the end.
And the only people who weren't surprised, I wasn't, and my campaign team, we weren't surprised. Well, I take that back. We were surprised. We were surprised that I didn't win. Because election night, the only thing that did surprise me was that I didn't win, because we fully expected to. I think that this time the perception from the press corps will be different. And I think that what the people of New York City are going to see, yes, is an aggressive campaign, and the coverage of an aggressive campaign, and the fair coverage of that. So I think it's a combination of things this time around. But I'm working hard each and every day, working towards, speaking to people, talking to them about a vision for the future of New York City, and being aggressive about it. So I think you'll get to see a very aggressive campaign this time, and one that gets covered fairly.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. Pleasure. Good seeing you again.
Thank you for coming on Turning.com.